food dyes have increased 500%. We're not trying to stop fast food or get rid of fast food. We want to make it the same as they do in Europe. McDonald's French fries, 11 ingredients here in the United States, including dimethyl polysiloxane, an ingredient you would find in silly putty. But in the UK, there's 3 ingredients, and the 4th ingredient is optional. It's just salt.
This is American Thought Leaders, and I'm Yanya Keller.
Ari, such a pleasure to have you on American Thought Leaders.
Thank you so much, John.
So, I was recently in Canada, and actually I thought of you because we were at the supermarket, and we thought, let's actually take a look at what Fruit Loops, what the ingredients are in Canada, and we were kind of shocked to discover it's quite different.
Yeah,
right?
it's quite different. It's different in Canada, it's different in Australia, it's different in India, it's different in all of Europe. And actually in Europe, there's a cigarette-type warning label that warns parents that says it may cause adverse effects on activity and attention to children when a product does have an artificial food dyes. So Kellogg's and many other American food companies simply remove the artificial food dyes from these countries that have stricter regulations, and they didn't make the change across the board. They didn't decide to make their products safer for all their customers. Instead, they use the regulations to their advantage, their financial advantage. So here in the United States, because our regulatory system allows them to, they're using the more poisonous ingredients here.
Because you would think once you realize that there are these serious problems, Bobby Kennedy recently was talking about the yellow food dye, right? That we would remove them, right? Just on principle.
Yes, absolutely. But unfortunately, our FDA is asleep at the wheel. And they're actually driving a bus right now through the gates of unhealthy hell with big food, big chem, and big pharma all in the passenger seat, driving the shots, right? And calling the shots. We've got the FDA commissioner, the current one, Dr. Robert Califf, just saying in a Senate testimony that he will not criticize the food industry.
Are you prepared to tell us that this committee, this Congress needs to take on the food and beverage industry whose greed is destroying the health of millions of people?
Well, I'm not going to castigate the people that work in the food and beverage industry.
You're not.
No, what
That
I will
is
say,
your job.
No, it's not to castigate. It's to point out how to make progress in this area.
If the FDA will not criticize the food industry, who's going to do it? They admitted they have not reviewed the safety data of these artificial dyes in over 10 years. However, children's consumption of these artificial food dyes have increased 500%.
So, I have to ask you the question. So, what do you make of these new appointments, in HHS, of course, Bobby Kennedy and Marty Makary as the prospective incoming FDA commissioner?
Well, those 2 appointments that you just mentioned are phenomenal. Those 2 gentlemen get it. They understand that American companies should not poison us with ingredients they don't use in other countries. They understand the failure of our regulatory system, allowing over 10,000 chemicals in our food supply here in the United States versus only 400 in Europe. They supported my campaign to take petitions to Kellogg's headquarters. We took over 400,000 signatures to Battle Creek, Michigan, Kellogg's headquarters, and they basically told us to get off their lawn. So we started a national boycott, and now we have one of the largest grassroots movements, and we are affecting sales at Kellogg's. Right now, over the last 12 weeks, Fruit Loop sales on grocery store shelves have gone down 54%. Their stock price of Kellogg's has gone down 14%. So we are making a fundamental change. We're saying, hey, dear food industry, if you continue to poison us with ingredients you don't use in other countries, we're going to bankrupt you into oblivion.
What does good policy look like? Let's start with this area. But of course, your interests are much broader than just food dyes.
I think good policy looks like doing common sense things. For example, red number 3 was banned in cosmetics over 30 years ago because it causes cancer. You can't apply red 3 to your skin, but you can still consume it. And the reason is that the alcohol industry conspired with the government to allow it, because you know what Red 3 is in? Cherries. And that would reduce alcohol sales because they couldn't put that bright red cherry in their drinks anymore. These are the common sense policies we need to fix, and we need to get the conflicts of interest out of the government so that we can get this solved.
What would be some of the things an FDA commissioner should do on day one from your viewpoint?
I mean, the first thing they could do is add a warning label to every product that has artificial food dyes, just like Europe has. That would automatically almost force the food industry to remove them here as well, because they do not want parents to be concerned about their products. Informed consent. We need to know what we're consuming. We need to know what we're putting in our bodies. We need to know what's happening in the healthcare system with medications, with pharma. We need to have this information. We need transparency into the things that have been, causing the chronic disease rates to skyrocket.
What other kinds of chemicals are commonly found here that have been removed from food systems in other countries, like say Europe, for example?
Well, there's one in particular that I petitioned Subway to remove, and it's called azodicarbonamide. It's found in yoga mats and shoe rubber. And actually, when you turn a yoga mat sideways, you kind of see little air bubbles. Well, it does the same thing in bread, and it makes it very uniform. It's banned in Europe, in Australia. If you get caught using it in Singapore, you get fined and put in jail. Here in the United States, bread manufacturers are allowed to use it. The problem with it is when it's heated, it turns into a carcinogen, and even more so when the factory workers use it to mix in the bread, it can get in their lungs and cause lung issues. So this is a very hazardous chemical that, again, is still allowed for use by our FDA, but banned almost everywhere else across the globe. So these are the kind of things we need to look at and see what makes sense to let the food industry know that they can't continue poisoning us with man-made chemicals, taking our God-given fruits and vegetables and all the things he gave us to eat and making them less nutritious, more addictive, full of additives so that they can make more money. That's got to stop.
In terms of, all of these additives, right? You're really talking about highly processed food, right?
I actually own a company that produces processed food, but we're using real ingredients that you would find in your own kitchen. We're sourcing organic ingredients that haven't been sprayed with pesticides or grown with antibiotics and growth hormone, right? We're using real food that nourishes the body, that you can recognize that came from God and earth. And that's the kind of processed foods we need in our world. And that's the products I wish to see in the world. And that's why I started my company, Truvani, because there were so many products out there that just literally are poisoning us to death.
One company which I think a lot of people at this event would be big fans of, right, is Chick-fil-A. But you also have raised some criticisms from what I understand. How has that whole process gone?
They should actually call it chemical fillet because it's full of chemicals. After I consulted with the company to remove several different toxic chemicals, which they did, which was fantastic, there's one ingredient they told me they couldn't remove, and that's the MSG. Well, MSG is fed to rats in obesity studies to make them fat. And we have an obesity epidemic in this country where 3/4 of our nation is overweight. We have to look at what the food industry is doing to make us eat more than we should. When you look at studies where they put people on a real food diet versus a processed food diet, every single time the processed food diet group eats more. Why is that? It's being engineered to be addictive, and we've got to stop that.
Okay, that's really interesting. I've heard this, and I kind of believe it. Let's say when I eat Cheetos, or I used to. I'm trying.
Well, Cheetos has yellow 6 in it, which is linked to rats getting tumors. And in lab studies, they just reported in the Wall Street Journal, I mean, I'm not making this up, very recently, that it will turn the skin of mice transparent. I mean, it's like a science experiment what's happening to our bodies. And as Americans, we have to rise up. We have our moment right now. We have top-down leadership happening for the first time in history. We actually have a moment right now to educate the public in such a way that these issues can finally get the truth out, right? And we have the opportunity to reach every single person and tell them the truth about what's happened to the food supply and tell them the things that my parents didn't know when they came here to America from India and they were so trusting of the American food system and they thought it was so amazing being able to go to McDonald's and find a cheap meal for their family, right? We need to tell Americans the truth of what's been done, and then we got to force the food companies to undo it. And that's what I've been doing with the Food Babe Army and so many different advocates. And I can't tell you how excited I am for the Make America Healthy movement and for President Trump himself to be sharing information that I've been sharing for over 10 years. I couldn't believe my eyes. My jaw was like wide open. I was like, wow. This is getting out there now in a way that I never thought was possible.
Bonnie, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun.